receipt said 0. No tip. Just a sharp, humiliating circle around the empty line where gratitude should have been. And for a moment, under the bright daytime lights of the crowded restaurant, Mateo Alvarez felt something inside him quietly collapse. It wasn't just about the money. It was never just about the money. The man who left that 0 was known to everyone in the city of San Verano. A billionaire, a headline maker, a man whose face smiled from business magazines and charity galas, and he had just walked out of the restaurant without leaving a single dollar for the single father who had served him with careful hands and tired eyes. Before we go any further, if you believe in kindness, second chances, and the quiet miracles that can change a life in a single moment, take a second right now to like this video, comment where you're watching from, share this story with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to the channel Deep Night Stories. Your support keeps these stories alive. The restaurant was called Solstice Grill, a sunlit corner bistro with tall windows that poured golden daylight over white tablecloths and polished glassware. It was the kind of place where business deals were signed over sparkling water and brunches stretched lazily into afternoon. For Mateo, it was survival. Every shift meant rent. Every smile meant groceries. Every tip meant another week his 6-year-old son wouldn't have to hear the word no. Mateo had once dreamed of becoming an architect. He had studied for 2 years before life folded in on him. His wife, Camilla, had fallen ill with a rare autoimmune disorder that drained their savings faster than he could refill them. The hospital corridors became his second home. He sold his textbooks, then his car, then finally his pride. When Camila passed away one bright morning that felt cruelly ordinary, Mateo was left with a small apartment, a mountain of debt, and a boy named Nico, who looked too much like her. Now, every day began before sunrise. He would wake Nico gently, braid the boy's unruly curls into some semblance of order, pack a peanut butter sandwich into a lunchbox with chipped edges, and walk him to Mrs. Alder's daycare, 3 blocks away. Then he would rush to Solstice Grill, tie his apron tight around his waist, and step into a world where he pretended everything was fine. The billionaire had arrived just after noon, escorted by 2 assistants in tailored suits. His name was Darius Whitmore, a tech magnate whose company had revolutionized renewable energy storage. Mateo recognized him instantly. Everyone did. Darius carried himself like someone accustomed to being watched. He wore a navy suit so precise it seemed sculpted onto him. His silver watch caught the sun each time he lifted his hand. Mateo had served him with meticulous care. He refilled his water before it dipped halfway. He described the chef's specials with a steady voice. He ensured the steak was medium rare, exactly as requested. Darius barely looked at him, speaking instead to his assistants about mergers and expansion plans. Still, Mateo remained professional, polite, invisible. When they finished, the assistants left first. Darius lingered, checking his phone. He signed the bill. With a swift stroke of a pen, stood up, adjusted his jacket, and walked out into the brilliant afternoon without a backward glance. Mateo didn't check the receipt immediately. He had other tables waiting. It wasn't until the lunch rush slowed that he cleared the table. He stacked the plates carefully, wiped the crumbs into his palm, and picked up the leather folder. 0. The number felt like a verdict. His chest tightened. The bill had been nearly $400. Even a modest tip would have meant school supplies for Nico, or a pair of new sneakers to replace the ones with thinning soles. Instead, there was nothing. Mateo forced himself to breathe. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe the assistant had left cash. He lifted the plates, and that was when he saw it. A small square of paper, folded neatly and tucked beneath the heavy porcelain dinner plate. It hadn't been visible at first glance. It was pressed flat, almost deliberately hidden. His hands trembled slightly as he unfolded it. The handwriting was firm and deliberate. If you are reading this, meet me at the address on the back at 4 p.m. Come alone. Bring this note. Mateo's heart pounded so loudly he could hear it over the hum of the restaurant. He flipped the paper. An address was written in the same precise script. It was in the financial district, inside one of the tallest buildings in San Verano, the Whitmore Tower. He stared at the note, confusion and suspicion wrestling in his mind. Was it a prank? A test? Something darker? Why not leave a tip like a normal person? Why the theatrics? He thought of Nico, of rent due in 5 days, of the eviction warning letter folded in the kitchen drawer. At 3:15, Matteo asked his manager if he could leave early. He rarely made such requests. The manager, a practical woman named Sonia, who had seen enough hardship in her own life to recognize it in others, nodded. Without questions. The Whitmore Tower glimmered under the afternoon sun, its glass facade reflecting the sky like a mirror. Matteo felt painfully underdressed as he stepped through the revolving doors in his simple button-down shirt and worn shoes. The lobby was vast and echoing, filled with marble floors and the faint scent of polished stone. A receptionist glanced up. Matteo presented the note silently. Her expression shifted from mild disinterest to alert recognition. She made a quick phone call, then gestured toward a private elevator. The ride up felt endless. When the doors opened, Darius Whitmore was standing alone in a spacious office with walls of glass overlooking the city. Daylight flooded the room. The billionaire had removed his jacket. His sleeves were rolled to reveal forearms that suggested he wasn't detached from physical effort as he appeared. Matteo stepped forward cautiously. Darius studied him with eyes that were sharp, but not unkind. He began to speak, his voice calm and controlled, explaining that he hadn't left a tip because he needed to know something first. He needed to know who Matteo was when he thought no one important was watching. Earlier that week, Darius had observed something from the restaurant window. A small boy waiting outside after school, sitting patiently on the curb with a book in his lap. The boy had dropped his stack, and instead of scolding him, Matteo had knelt down, brushed the crumbs away, and kissed the top of his head with a tenderness that lingered. Darius had lost his own father at a young age. He knew what it meant to grow up feeling unseen. He told Matteo that wealth had taught him an uncomfortable truth. People often performed kindness when they expected reward. He wanted to see how Matteo reacted to disappointment. Matteo felt heat rise to his face. He admitted honestly that seeing the zero had hurt, not because he believed he was entitled to generosity, but because he had hoped. And hope, when crushed, left bruises. There was no anger in his words, only exhaustion. Darius nodded slowly, as if that was the answer he had been waiting for. Then he turned to his desk and opened a slim leather folder. Inside was a document, an application for a scholarship fund that Darius had quietly established in memory of his father. It supported single parents pursuing education while raising children. Darius had reviewed Matteo's background after noticing him that first afternoon. He had learned about the unfinished architecture degree, the hospital bills, the late-night shifts. He told Matteo that the zero tip had been a risk, a test of character, and that hidden note had been an invitation. Matteo felt the world tilt slightly. The scholarship would cover tuition for the remaining 2 years of his degree. It included a living stipend, childcare assistance, flexible scheduling. It wasn't charity in the traditional sense. It was an investment. Matteo's hands shook as he read the details. He imagined drawing buildings again, designing spaces filled with light instead of balancing trays under it, but fear crept in. What if he failed? What if he couldn't juggle fatherhood and classes? What if he disappointed the one person who believed in him? Darius seemed to sense the storm inside him. He explained that second chances were rarely comfortable. They demanded courage. He wasn't offering a guarantee of success, only an opportunity. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the skyline, Matteo walked back to his small apartment with the note and the documents clutched against his chest. Nico ran to the door when he entered, wrapping his arms around his father's legs. Matteo knelt down, pressing his forehead against his son's. For the first time in years, the future did not feel like a narrow hallway closing in. It felt like a window opening. The months that followed were not easy. Matteo returned to school during the day and worked part-time evenings. He studied after Nico fell asleep, drafting blueprints at the kitchen table while city lights flickered outside. There were nights he wanted to quit, days when exhaustion blurred his vision. But he remembered the zero. He remembered the sting of it and the hidden promise beneath. Darius occasionally checked in, not as a distant benefactor, but as a quiet mentor. He introduced Matteo to engineers, encouraged him to think boldly, to design structures that blended sustainability with humanity. Years passed. Nico grew taller. The eviction notices stopped coming. Matteo graduated at the top of his class. The day he received his diploma, sunlight streamed through the auditorium windows, illuminating the tears in his eyes. His first major project was a community center in a low-income neighborhood. He designed it with wide windows and open courtyards where children could play safely in daylight. He insisted on affordable materials and green technology. When the building opened, families lined up outside, their laughter echoing against the fresh paint. On opening day, Matteo spotted Darius standing quietly at the back of the crowd. No cameras, no speeches. Just a man observing the ripple of a choice he had once made. Matteo approached him, gratitude flooding his expression. Darius simply nodded toward the children running through the courtyard and said that this was always the point. The zero tip became a private symbol between them, not of humiliation, but of hidden potential. If this story has touched your heart even a little, if it made you think about the quiet struggles people carry, and the unseen notes life might be hiding beneath ordinary moments, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs encouragement, and subscribe to Deep Night Stories so we can continue bringing you stories that remind us of our shared humanity. And before we close, I have a special request for you. Comment the word hope below if you believe that even the smallest test can lead to the greatest transformation. Years later, when Nico asked his father why he kept that old receipt framed in his office, Matteo smiled softly. He told his son that sometimes a zero is not emptiness. Sometimes it is space. Space waiting to be filled with courage, faith, and the decision to show up even when no one seems to notice. On a bright afternoon, much like the one when everything began, Matteo stood by the window of his new office overlooking San Verano. The city shimmered in daylight. Somewhere below, a waiter hurried between tables. A father rushed to pick up his child. A stranger folded a note. And Matteo understood something profound. Kindness is not always loud. It does not always announce itself with applause or glittering tips. Sometimes it hides beneath the plate, waiting for the right hands to lift it. He closed his eyes briefly, breathing in the warmth of the sun through the glass. The journey from that zero to this moment had not been simple. It had been filled with doubt, sacrifice, and relentless effort, but it had also been filled with grace. And in the end, that hidden note did far more than change a waiter's day. It changed a child's future. It proved that even in the harsh light of day, where struggles are exposed and dignity is tested, miracles can unfold quietly, one brave choice at a time.